Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Make Trades Great Again podcast. Andy and Eric here. Bonus episode. We have got a topic that is much bigger than a bonus, but we're gonna brush into this thing and we're gonna address a DM that came in, Andy.
Okay.
Message came in asking or praising us for helping, explain how to set your price, your hourly rate. If you're doing service contracting, this is what I got to charge, how to get there. And we've talked about that multiple times. Most recently what do you think is about a year ago now?
Yeah, probably something like that.
Probably got a bridge. We probably need to shorten that whole process up and redo it again, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But today, in response to the DM, it was, thanking us for that, the question was posed, how do I know how much if I can afford an employee, if I want to bring my first one on, how do I figure that out? Like, how do I charge for them? How do I get started on that? And so we're not going to go through this whole 2-hour long process of calculating it out, but we can hit the basics on it pretty easily. I think you've had a lot of experience doing this yourself.
So to go, kind of recap back on that, how do I figure out how much I need to charge? I mean, what do I do? If I've got two guys that are going to show up on a job,
Yep.
Well, if I got two guys showing up on a job, I'm charging for, if we're going to be there for an hour, we're charging for 2 hours of labor, right? I mean, why wouldn't you? You don't go to the restaurant and order a steak for two and expect to get a discount, right? No, you get two steaks.
Well, I mean, you and your buddy can split it, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if we could do it that way. We'd just order the 40-ounce T-bone every time, and you get what you get, and if you don't eat it, you still pay for it.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You still pay for it if you don't use it. So, But setting the price, setting your price, we took into account all the things, every bit
all
of
the
expense.
expenses.
There's so many things, and it included things like, insurance and vehicle maintenance, everything, every operating expense you have that isn't going away. We included in how to calculate the hourly rate.
Yep.
Well, but that doesn't change. Like you and I were talking offline about this. It doesn't change for your employee. Now, if you're going to bring on 4 employees and now you've got 5 people, you don't take everything and times it by 5. You have to charge that rate per person.
Yes.
And you're not charging more for one person than the other. If you're all doing the same work, you have a fixed rate. This is what we charge. We're Mickelson Plumbing and Heating, and here's our hourly rate. If we're going to bid things this way, or if we're going to charge you time and material.
Yep, absolutely. And that's something that you gotta look at, because, if it's just me and I'm working in let's say a work comp exempt state, where I don't have to pay certain benefits on my labor, then fine. Okay. You're whatever. But as soon as you hire an employee, that employee must be covered by some sort of workman's compensation insurance and unemployment
on
insurance.
The payroll at that point, I think.
Everybody. Right.
Yep.
And so we've always taken it that all of those things are a given, right? Those are fixed expenses.
Okay.
If you work 1 hour, and then you're going to have 1 hour's worth of expenses in the
on the ledger,
on the payroll, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's just like buying and selling, parts. So, I mean, those are expenses. They got to get accounted for. And so we've always looked at it in that aspect. If we've got an employee out there, we're going to anticipate that employee is going to work 40 hours, right? Are we going to get 40 hours out of them?
You're going to pay him for 40.
Yeah, we're going to pay him for 40. And I got to anticipate that I'm going to have a bill for 40 hours worth of payroll, taxes, federal taxes, state taxes, the unemployment insurance. What else is there? There's going to be retirement. There's going to be health insurance. There's going to be workman's compensation insurance. There's 6 or 7, 8 variables in there that are an hourly rate. That has to be figured in, right? At no point in time does your employee cost you $30 an hour because that's what you're paying them. That's not how this works.
No.
Right?
Gotcha.
So it's bigger than that. And so one of the things that we've always looked at is that we're going to pay that, and we're going to pay that probably whether they work or not, right? That's the challenging piece.
Okay.
Um, and a lot of that comes down to the fact that I make the schedule, Cheryl and I make the schedule for our company, and the guys should not be penalized on our inability to provide work. We hired them with a full-time expectation,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I see what you're saying. Sure.
we're gonna do our best to pay them that direction.
But even okay, that aside, that can get
Yep,
into a long discussion, I
sure can.
think. Aside from that, you have to on your end, and where you're going with this, I know, is you have to account for that when you're setting your wage. We are going to
Absolutely.
have, if we're going to have 4 employees, 40 hours each, that's 160 hours. This is what we're going to have to pay out for each
Yeah,
person. This is their wage. This is their health and welfare. This is their workman's comp. This is, what else is, whatever,
yeah,
you name it, whatever other
right,
expenses there.
right.
You can say, we have to, pay this every month, like you're saying, that's your expense.
Sure,
It's fixed regardless of if they're working or not, because
right.
you can't say, well, we know every week at this year we're not going to have this and that's going to affect our hourly rate. No, that's not how this works.
Right. Yeah,
So
you
your
got to.
hourly rate is calculated the same way whether you've got employees or you're working it for yourself.
Yeah, yeah. It really should be, and there shouldn't be. We've gone back and forth on this.
Mm-hmm.
There are times when we'll be out on a job, and let's say that Miles has never worked on an oil burner, right? So
Sure.
Miles and I go out to work on an oil burner. I don't need a second guy there to work on this oil burner, right? Is he
Right.
doing things? Absolutely.
Sure.
In those cases, I'm typically not going to charge the customer for 2 guys, right? This is a
Right. So now
learning
you've got,
experience,
now you're
right?
not pulling in enough. You're not
Yeah,
charging enough for your expenses. Yeah, I got
right.
you.
So in those cases, I got to go say, okay, you know what? We're going to write off, not necessarily write off. I mean, we're not going to track it as like, oh, this is labor that was spent on time training. I
Right.
could, but it's a whole nother level of stuff that I'm not really interested in tracking. Um, and in that aspect, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not doing it often enough that I need to say I spent 200 hours on
Right.
training, right? So is it 10 hours a year, 20 hours a year? Sure. Okay, you know what? Can I write off 20 hours a year and just not worry about it? Absolutely.
Right.
Hopefully I'm operating in the black far enough that those things aren't going to be what drags us under. Um, so we're always looking at that going, okay, 2 guys that are physically there doing the job of 2 guys, they're getting billed for 2 guys worth of labor. There is no helper fee. There's no nothing like that. It's just 2 guys there. There's 2 trucks there. There's whatever. And we bill it out that direction. And we
Yeah.
rarely get any pushback on it.
Well, it's just so it
It's
is,
it is what it is.
you could have one person doing the same amount of work. It just takes twice as long.
Twice as long.
Nece-
Yeah.
you know, stupid,
Sure.
easy math. It doesn't work
Yeah.
out that way, but you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Um, yeah, no. So not a lot changes, but as far as setting your wages, you have to figure all of this out. This is what goes into setting your wage. So somebody that is working alone, like me, and let's say I'm going to bring somebody on, I'm going to have to revisit this. I'm going to have to go, okay, I know what I need to make, and maybe I'm not going to pay that person as much as me. Well, I mean, I have
Yeah.
the right to do that, right? But
Yep.
either way, I know what it's going to take. I know how many hours we expect to be paid between 2 people, all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to just refigure because my expenses are going to change. I don't
Yeah.
have to have work comp here in Minnesota.
Right.
I'm opted out of it. Have been since 2005 when I started there or whatever
Yep.
and that's on me, but it's an expense I don't have.
Right.
So I don't have to, I don't have to worry about that. I bring somebody on, totally different. Now I have to pay it.
Right.
And
We're the same way.
Yeah, it's a significant expense. Okay. So anyway, that's all built in. The next part of this question though, logically would be, and we would be stupid to not bring it up. If you're going to do this and you can figure out how to charge, and I know you can, you better also understand that you have to have X amount of dollars laying
Yeah.
in wait
Yep.
in the bank. You have to be able to cover your expenses if things don't go the way you want them to,
Yeah.
because you're going to have jobs that are paid late. You're going to do work at the end of the month that isn't going to get paid on time, things like
Right.
that. It just
Right.
happens.
Yeah. What we've ended up doing with that is we've taken, and this has been for quite a while, 10 years maybe. We have always taken all the money that we get from credit card sales, and they automatically, through our invoicing software, get deposited into a separate bank account than our operating account. Right.
Okay.
So, and there's some reasons why we do that, and we won't get into that on this episode. We funnel all that money off into that account, and then
Offshore banking.
offshore banking. Yeah,
Okay.
it's in
Yep.
Switzerland, Swiss
I'm hearing
banking.
you. Okay. Tell me
and
more. No.
well, I had to take a trip to BVI for a reason,
Yeah.
Anyway, we put it in that bank account, and then we pay out of that account. Right.
Okay.
So there's
Yeah.
always this lump of money there, and we make payments out of it. Maybe we'll pay off, whatever these items, these materials with it. And we generally will do that so that we can watch that dollar amount and kind of look at like what is if we took any 1/4 of expenses and payroll, what is 1/4's worth of payroll cost? Is that 100,000? Is that 150,000? Is it,
Okay.
500,000? What is it? And that amount of money stays in that account. That's a rainy day fund. Right?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, I mean, I guess it doesn't.
And it doesn't even have to be that elaborate. I'm just saying,
it doesn't have to be special, like our payments going to this.
No,
You're just saying in general, because you can just figure that out with your accountant.
Yep. You can.
But yeah, I hear what you're saying. That's just how you're doing it, and for other reasons that we're not getting into.
Yep.
Yeah, having basically operating expenses for 3 months is probably the minimum, right? I mean,
I think
as
so.
you and I agree, it's more than we need, but like I wouldn't want to have less.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hate to bring it up and talk about it in like a morbid expense or a morbid sense or whatever, but in the event that, let's say, something happened to me,
Absolutely.
I was in a car wreck or whatever, and I was unable to perform my daily tasks.
Yeah.
For 60 days. Right.
It's going to take 60 days to figure that out in the first place.
Let's say I'm in a coma. What? I'm tapped out or worse, whatever.
Let's just say you can't work.
I can't work. Right.
But I don't want to see Andy in a coma.
No, I know. But what I'm saying is that the business no longer has my input.
Yeah.
How long does it take before the business is back on its feet operating in a profitable manner?
Yeah, well,
60 days is a pretty short turnaround for somebody to step in.
It is very short.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's why I'm saying minimum.
Yeah. And could you take at that same time and go, okay, you know what, this isn't going to work out and we're going to close? Absolutely. That's totally an option. However,
you still got payroll. You still got this week to figure that out. You still got next week to figure that out.
Yeah. And that's the thing where I say having that 90-day buffer, it's not easy to do. And it's not something that you're going to be like, oh, I just started business 2 weeks ago, and how am I going to come up with a 90-day buffer? I haven't even worked for 90 days. Well, you're not. No. This is why you grow a business. And during that growth period, you also identify, these are the things that I need to do to be a responsible business owner. And if you're not doing that, you need to figure out how to do it.
Well, you have to establish credit. Yeah. You have to save, like you're saying. Yeah. You have to build this into you have to have processes that are feeding this to grow it.
Yep.
And also you have to have back to establishing that credit. You have to be able to borrow that money. If that's truly, if you're going to go into this without having those resources, and some accountants and some people are much smarter than me might advise you not to pay it out of your pocket if need be. They might say you should be, this should be somebody else's money, that kind of thing. Now, there's reasons for that we're not going to get into, and I don't fully understand half of them anyway.
Right.
I pretend I do, but I don't, And the fact of the matter is like you're saying, it's responsibility. It's doing it the right way, and this is part of it. But it's not. It shouldn't be so scary that it should stop you
No,
from doing it.
no, and that's the thing is, I mean, you've got to early on identify that this is something we're doing, and we're doing it,
Oh yeah.
and it is never. This is one of those things, and this is, I think, where people get into trouble is they start looking at that, or they get their personal expenses or their personal payroll, the owner's cut,
Mm-hmm.
overshares that, and pretty quick they're like, oh crap, we got to make this boat payment, or we got to make a camper payment, and
Well, if you've set up to do that out of your business, that's just a wrong.
well,
You've
but
went down the wrong path.
yeah, where you've gone to the point where you're like, well, we're going to make that other payment in the business next week.
No, that's
That
not an option.
pump the brakes hard.
Yep.
You need
Right.
to, as soon as you're starting to borrow money, and especially if you're starting to borrow money from your employees,
Oh boy.
oof, boy. I remember
Meaning you're not going to make payroll.
you're not going to make their payroll. You're not going to pay their bennies. You're not going to pay their taxes.
Nope.
Things
Not
like
an
that.
option.
That's not an option. Not an option.
Absolutely.
And yeah, if this is the way that you operate, you got some serious financial issues that you got to work through. And those are fighting words.
It's never going to get better.
I remember a mechanical contractor back when I don't know if I was an apprentice, might have been a journeyman, that was part of our local. And that contractor had been basically sending out pay stubs for the employees who were working a shutdown. And there was like 60 employees working this shutdown. And they were getting pay stubs that showed that their bennies were getting paid and their taxes were getting paid, and they were not. They were paying flat wages on the check, and that was all that was getting submitted. And that went on for like 4 months.
Yeah.
On a big shutdown, and then they filed bankruptcy, and that was about the time that all the guys' health insurance ran out. About the time they filed bankruptcy, and that was when they learned that they basically had been working for wages for 90 days, 60 days.
Yeah.
That's
terrible.
That's a scary thing when you go, oh, that's cool. I made $100,000 on this shutdown and I paid 0 taxes.
Yeah, there you go. Yikes.
That sucks.
That's crazy. That's crazy. No, you can't operate that way. But if you're thinking about employees, your first employee, maybe you didn't do it right the first time around. I mean, we didn't get into the technical aspect of this, but the basics are they're laid out pretty much the same as establishing your rate.
Yep.
You're just gonna reestablish it. You're gonna look at what your expenses, how they're gonna change, and what you need to do to maintain your current or future goals, and how you're gonna establish that rate that you're gonna charge. Right.
Yeah.
And that goes whether you're spending, doing time and material type of service work or you're doing flat rate. It's all the same.
Yeah.
When you're establishing your costs and you're putting it into those formulas to figure it out.
Yeah.
And like you said, keep the money aside because there's no option. There's no not paying.
No.
For any reason. That's not an option.
Yeah. That's not a saving. That's not a loan account where we can be like, oh, well, we have this money and we could always do this in order to get that money back. No, don't.
Right.
Just don't. Something, and we mention this every time we talk about calculating rates. Use realistic numbers. Just do your best to figure out realistic numbers. Try not to add fluff into that. You know what I mean? Like, try not to over anticipate, that, oh, my insurance could be, $700 a month. And, I'm just going to figure it at 12. Right. Because what it ends up doing is it takes your hourly rate. It will give you fictitious numbers. Right. Eventually that added fluff will come back to bite you on the other end. Because you're like, oh, geez, I got to account for this. And then the numbers don't match up. And yeah, maybe you made more money, but maybe you lost jobs.
Well,
because
the losing jobs thing it's pretty easy to really, I mean, you can sum that up by saying if you raised your price 10%, but you lost 12% of the jobs.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's an oversimplification of it, but that's where you're going.
Yep.
And it's just a spiral and it's exponential. It's not going to happen all at once, but it's going to happen right now. And then, in third quarter, it's going to be slower, but it spirals, it adds
Yep.
up,
Well,
like you're saying that reserve, it's hard to build that reserve up if you're constantly dipping into it.
yep. Yep. Well, that's
There you go.
food for thought.
It is great info, dude. Thank you.
Yep. No problem.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. You too.